Welcome back, Irish fans. Breaking on Braves Boys podcast. After a tough summer on the recruiting trail for Notre Dame, where they only landed Marcus Burton, missed out on a bunch of other top targets, and got cut from a few other lists. Notre Dame has landed two top 150 players in the 2023 class in a 6-day span. So nice turnaround of the class for Mike Brey and staff. It isn't the sexy class of 2022 with a five-star recruit and a freak athlete, and also a very practical top 150, top 100 type of guy. But this is a class that is practical. It's going to be a class with three guys who play three roles very well. It's a class with a somewhat high floor. Maybe the ceiling isn't as high as a 2022 for Notre Dame, but a 2023 class like this to complement that class and complement some of the guys they get in the transfer portal is certainly needed. And the newest addition besides Brady Dunlap, today Notre Dame got Parker Friedrichsen to commit. Told Mike Brey on Sunday of his commitment and made it official today. So big gift for Notre Dame. Obviously, this was one that I wasn't 100% confident that they would get. They were always in the running. They always made a good impression on Parker Friedrichsen, but there were some family ties to Nebraska. Just kind of seemed like a Big Ten guy for a little bit there. Had a Final Five: Notre Dame, Nebraska, Rice, Davidson, Northwestern. Canceled his Northwestern and Rice visits. Was down to Notre Dame, Nebraska, and Davidson. I think it was ultimately a Notre Dame, Nebraska battle, although Davidson did a nice job in the recruitment staying in. But Notre Dame ultimately wins it, and Mike Brey and Anthony Solomon did a really nice job with this recruitment. Didn't quite dominate it like Brady Dunlap, where it kind of just seemed like as soon as Notre Dame got involved, they were the team to beat. But seemed like Friedrichsen was a guy that Notre Dame pushed for early after his offer and made a great impression with. Going to go more into his recruitment in a second, but Friedrichsen, obviously a useful piece for Notre Dame. Maybe not a five-star JJ Starling, Blake Wesley type, but as a 6'3", 165-pound combo guard. I view him more as a two, but I guess he does have some ball handling ability. In terms of that, I would consider him more of like a Cormac Ryan, where he's like your emergency ball handler, maybe not a guy that you really rely on to bring the ball up, especially when you have a guy like Marcus Burton and probably some guys from the portal, maybe even Marco Jackson in the class. Uh, but who's to say that he couldn't become a steady ball handler for them as a second or third option. Friedrichsen's a consensus 4-star top 150 player, like I said. 247 has him at 102. I think I'm a little lower than 102 on him. I think I'm more towards the top 150 ranking than 102, just because Dane Goodwin was ranked 100 as a senior in high school, and I was, I think, a little bit more developed and probably had a bit of a higher ceiling. It's kind of where I get that from. The comparison, I think, for Friedrichsen is more of like a Steve Vasturia, maybe Cormac Ryan offensive profile. But I do think Goodwin is somewhat comparable just because of the ranking and just because of kind of the role he has on Notre Dame's team. But like I said, I think Friedrichsen is more of a top 150 guy, but to kind of see where they're coming from with the higher ranking, look back at the high school season, Friedrichsen averaged 28 points per game last year and shot 44% from three. And when you look at Friedrichsen's game, one thing really stands out, and that's the shot making. 44% from three in any league is pretty dang good. Keep in mind, he was the best player on his team and one of the best players in the state. So those numbers aren't just catch and shoot threes. It's a lot of him having to play off one or two bounces, maybe even having to create more for himself a little bit at times. But I would take the points per game a little bit of a grain of salt, but the 44% from three just shows how special of a shooter he is. And that was a big factor in why Notre Dame decided to take him and why he generated so much high power five interest. There was also a few bigger schools, I'm not sure if I can share, that were trying to get involved late, and they were a little late to the party after Friedrichsen had cut his list to three. But going into his recruitment, Notre Dame was also a late entrant to their recruitment. After the board kind of cleared out, RJ Jones had committed elsewhere. Aiden Holloway had committed elsewhere. Notre Dame offered Friedrichsen on August 8th. This was after the Burton commitment. Almost immediately after the offer, Friedrichsen dropped the top five. Notre Dame was included with the other schools I mentioned: Nebraska, Rice, Davidson, Northwestern. After that, just a few weeks later, August 26th through 28th, Notre Dame already got him on campus. Visit obviously went very well. After that, I think it was September 12th, Brey and staff went to Bixby High School to watch practice, do an in-home with Friedrichsen. Made a great impression there. From there, he canceled his Northwestern visit and it was essentially Notre Dame, Nebraska, Davidson. Eventually, Notre Dame obviously won that recruitment, and Mike Bray's staff, I'm sure, were happy when they heard on Saturday morning, not Sunday morning, that Friedrichsen would be Irish, and Notre Dame would have another member added to a class that once looked like it could be doomed, but now is a practical, solid, probably top 30 class, I would guess, when it's all said and done. Maybe a little bit lower than that. Haven't The rankings aren't out yet because the commitment is not official when I'm filming this, but looking more into Friedrichsen's game, which is, I guess, what matters most. Offensively, like I said, shot making. That's the number one thing with Friedrichsen. He can complement it with other things, but shot making is the thing that his offensive game is built around. You look at any tape of Parker Friedrichsen, and it's just full of him shooting it from three, shooting it off different platforms with a hand in his face, open off the catch, open off one or two bounces, maybe off one or two moves here or there. But Friedrichsen's shot making is really what makes him stand out, especially from behind the arc, one of the best shooters in the class. And I think Mike Bray and Anthony Solomon would probably give you an argument as to why Friedrichsen is the best shot maker, or at least 3-point shooter in the class. So a lot to like from the shot making profile there. I'm not sure if he is a incredible off the dribble creator, but I do view him as a little bit more than just a catch and shoot 3-point guy, although I think that might be his role, at least early on, if he can see the floor. I do think maybe later on in his career, he could be a guy who can make a move or two here or there, kind of like Dane Goodwin's offensive development, where he's not going and isoing guys maybe like a Cormac Ryan would do, but he is making a move here or there where you're like, wow, where did that come from? And you could see that he kind of developed a few moves throughout his career. Maybe Parker Friedrichsen could kind of do that. Steve Vasturi also had a little bit of that in his game. I think that's probably the best comp for a former Notre Dame player, and kind of the role Friedrichsen will play is Steve Vasturia, kind of a maybe not underranked guy, but not a top 100 type guy coming out of high school. At least I don't think Vasturia was that high. I was like 10, but just looking at kind of Vasturia's career arc as a kind of a specialist where he was on good teams, would hit big shots for good teams in big games. I think that's kind of what I ideally think about Friedrichsen's role being down the line. Obviously, has a little bit more to his game, like I said, than just a catch and shoot guy. Kind of like a Fletcher Lawyer, I think is the best total comp. If you watch Fletcher Lawyer, the Purdue commit, who is now on campus for Purdue, I believe. But that's probably the two comps I think of the most: Steve Asturia and a lot of Fletcher Lawyer. Cormac Ryan is one that's been brought up a lot. I think Cormac has a little more off the dribble and slightly more athleticism than Parker Friedrichsen. I also don't think the defense is really comparable. I think Cormac Ryan's defense is better than essentially any recruit that Notre Dame is going after right now. But Friedrichsen, I think, is going to be a nice complementary piece to a Marcus Burton and Brady Dunlap. I talked a few days ago in the Brady Dunlap commitment show about how Dunlap is like the perfect safety blanket for Marcus Burton. He can be a screener. He can be a catch and shoot guy. He can be a guy who can maybe go get you a shot off one or two bounces. Can just kind of bail Burton out when things are going poorly, and maybe can bail Notre Dame out a little bit when the ball's not flowing real well. Friedrichsen is kind of the same kind of guy just because of his shot making ability. And although he might not be the guy you just hand the ball to and say, go get me a bucket, if Notre Dame's offense is flowing, Friedrichsen is going to be a huge contributor. Kind of reminds me of like a TJ Gibbs, where Notre Dame's offense wasn't flowing, things might not have been as great. But if they were moving the ball and they weren't hitting shots, you knew there was one guy on the floor who would probably hit a shot, and it was TJ Gibbs. I think Parker Friedrichsen could kind of be like that, where he's not the guy who's going to ISO, go get you a bucket off 10 bounces, but he is a guy who will probably hit big shots when you need him to hit big shots, and maybe help Marcus Burton kind of get settled by spacing the floor around him and adding a shooter around him. So this is a class to me that has three guys who are going to fit three roles incredibly well. Marcus Burton can be the one. I think Marcus Burton has a really nice offensive profile. It's just a straight up point guard with the quickness. I think the court vision is certainly developing. And I think he certainly is unselfish, especially when he plays with other good players. I'd like to see more from him in the high school season in that regard as to being a true one. But Burton, I think, can be the true one for Notre Dame down the line. Parker Friedrichsen can be the two, where he's kind of the go-to catch and shoot, go make an open three type guy, who you can run off screens, who you can just kind of end a possession with after a few passes with an open look and you feel really good about it. Brady Dunlap's also kind of the same way offensively. He can be a nice screener. He can be a catch and shoot guy who's also like that safety blanket type guy who you end a possession with the ball in his hands and you feel pretty good about it. Dunlap's also a nice versatile defensive piece, although like I talked about, I don't know if he's a great defender at one position yet. I think we need to hold our hats on him being a awesome defender right out of the gate, but the length is there. The footwork can be there just because of the agility he has, and I think the ceiling's high on that end for him. Friedrichsen, I think, needs to put on some muscle to improve as a defender, a little bit of technical work as well to be an effective college defender. He is engaged, which I like, but I'm just not sure the defensive ceiling is there of maybe I hate to bring up Blake Wesley because he's just such a freak athlete, but maybe if a Blake Wesley or like a Robbie Carmody defensive ceiling, I don't know if it's there, but I do think Friedrichsen could develop into a serviceable defender over the years, kind of like TJ Gibbs did, where I think Friedrichsen's actually more athletic than TJ Gibbs. But Gibbs developed into a at least serviceable defender throughout his 4 years and was one of Notre Dame's better defenders in his senior year. So Friedrichsen, an elite defender, no. If there's a hurdle to him playing early on, it's probably going to be defense. And I could foresee that certainly just with how old the guards in the ACC are. I think he might have a little bit of trouble being an effective defender at that level, at least early on. And if he doesn't play, it's going to be because of that. Also with Dunlap, just because of maybe he needs to build his frame out a little bit more. But defense is going to be the thing with Friedrichsen, and also just learning how to find his shots against higher level players. Obviously, Under Armour circuit is a high level. High school basketball, scoring 28 points a game is a high level, but it's not Notre Dame and it's not the ACC. So I would like to see kind of how he adjusts to practice. Can he get his open looks early on without physically maturing a little bit? And can he hit them at as high of a clip as he has? I don't think this is a guy that you're gonna have to worry about missing a lot of catch and shoot threes, but early on, if defense can get him off his spot and show him a little bit of the improved length of the ACC as opposed to the high school level, then it's going to be a little tough for him to crack the rotation early on. But I do think it's a possibility just because he plays that one certain role so well. And this class is one that's kind of built on that. It's not guys who are uber hyped up recruits. It's guys that are going to come in and are going to play practical roles and are going to be fixtures on good teams if Notre Dame has them. So really like kind of how this class shaped out. It almost reminds me a little bit of what 2020 was supposed to be. I think this class has more talent than 2020 for sure. Certainly a much higher floor because that class has two projects who are still on Notre Dame's roster. The most sure thing was Elijah Taylor, who ended up going down with injuries and is now at Quinnipiac. But this class, I think, has guys who have a better chance of coming in and contributing from day one. Tony Sanders is still a project offensively. Zona's got to work on his footwork, just moving. And these guys, I don't think will have as many issues as those guys had. But I do think it's a class that kind of has the same mold of that type of class where you complement a really good one in 2018 with the 2020 class. Obviously, 2019 was not that way, but 2020 was a nice complement to 2018 on paper. Just hasn't really panned out for Notre Dame yet. Can this class become a nice complementary class to a 2022 with a guy like JJ Starling and Van Allen Lubin in the class, guys who can be legitimate stars for Notre Dame down the line? Can these guys complement them and then potentially even develop into stars of their own down the line? So it's a class that you may not find a superstar from. I think if you're going to find that, it's probably going to be Dunlap or Burton. I'm not sure Friedrichsen is that level of scorer to be that, and probably not that level of defender either. But this class is one that could be really useful for Notre Dame, and good college basketball teams can sustain success with classes like this. You land the 5-star JJ Starling, and I'm not saying he'll come back, but if you can get a guy like that back or get a nice transfer and complement them with guys who know how to play their roles and kind of let those guys free flow in the offense and kind of play a more ball dominant role in terms of just being a score first guy, I think Notre Dame could be in a really good spot. Say if you threw Marcus Hammond into this team, if you made a recruiting pitch to Marcus Hammond out of the transfer portal and said, "We have a true point guard, you don't have to worry about that. We have a guy who can play the two or the three, who isn't going to take bad shots. He's going to hit him when he's open, and he's going to let you work as kind of an ISO guy like you've been accustomed to." And then you have Brady Dunlap, who will also kind of do that. He'll play his role. He won't take too many bad shots, and he's going to help out defensively down the line. I think Marcus Hammond would certainly be interested in that. So it's a nice class for Notre Dame. It's not the elite class that I was really hoping that they would get with a TJ Power. A Marco Jackson, I guess, is still in play since they're getting an official on the 30th. It's the 25th now, so a few days from when this podcast will come out. But it's not an elite class for Notre Dame, but it is a serviceable one that if Notre Dame is really good in 3 or 4 years, you can look back on and say, man, that's like a VJ Beacham, Steve Astoria type class where those guys developed into really nice players on really good teams to complement a Jaren Grant or a Demetrius Jackson. Can Notre Dame find a Demetrius Jackson and Jaren Grant? That's a little bit more difficult, but they have pieces around what they hope can be those guys. And things are certainly looking up for Notre Dame after a rough summer on the trail. We'll talk more about Notre Dame's freshman class in 2022 in the next podcast. I really appreciate you guys tuning in. God bless. And leave a comment. Let me know what you think about Parker Friedrichsen, Brady Dunlap, and Marcus Burton as a class. Do we think Notre Dame can close on Marco Jackson against some blue bloods and some other super high-level schools? We'll have to see. But right now, pretty solid class. I'm not 100% sure Notre Dame's done. I still think they could probably throw out an offer here or there, maybe try to get a big in this class, although the front court is a little crowded, assuming Matt Zona stays, and assuming Notre Dame could maybe get a transfer. Dom Campbell could be a playable guy next year. But I think for now, this is a really solid class for Notre Dame, and there's still time to add some guys late in the cycle. So I appreciate you guys watching. Again, God bless, and peace.